So when you see this particular road sign, one car painted red and the other car painted black, it simply means overtaking is not allowed. And in most instances, this is because the road is actually a narrow road, and so if you try overtaking, you might cause accident, and so overtaking is usually prohibited. Can you see this very sign? It means one-way drive. What this means is you are only allowed to move in a particular direction, and so you cannot drive in the reverse direction. Now, if you do not pay attention to this particular sign, it could actually get you into trouble, particularly in a military zone. As a matter of fact, I've been a victim of this before. I didn't even see the sign and I drove in the other direction, and by the time I got very far, and because it was a military zone, they stopped me, and honestly, you don't want to know what happened. But certainly ignorance was not an excuse at that time. The same thing, and also when you see this, it means it is a two-way drive, meaning you can drive in both directions. When you see this particular sign that looks like a bridge, it means there's a narrow bridge ahead. There's a narrow bridge ahead, and so you have to drive with caution, and in most instances you can't overtake. Now guys, have you seen this before? Sometimes it could be 50, it could be 60, or it could even be 70. But what this means is the maximum speed is actually 50 kilometers per hour, meaning you are not allowed to drive more than 50 kilometers per hour. If what you see there is 60, it means the maximum speed is 60 kilometers per hour. And this is very common around residential areas or school areas. So you're not allowed to drive beyond this particular speed. How about this sign? Have you seen it before? It is mostly around overhead bridges. What is very common in Nigeria is usually 5 meters. So what this means is any truck that is higher than 5 meters cannot drive through, and so the maximum height permitted for any truck to drive through is usually 5 meters. And so if your truck is higher than 5 meters, you might find it very difficult to drive through. So one must actually take note of this. Have you seen this before? It means no entry. Very, very important. You just have to be very careful of this. In a place where you are told no entry, the consequences, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to get into that, is usually very terrible. It is also applicable to this. So when you see this, it simply means no parking, and so you're not allowed to park your car in such location. So this particular sign means there's a school ahead, and so you are advised to drive with caution and usually drive at a very minimum speed so as to avoid accident. And the same thing with this too. When you see this particular sign, it means there's a possibility of wild animals crossing the road while you are driving, and this sign is usually found around the forest regions in case you find them crossing the road where so many wild animals could actually be crossing, and so you are advised to drive carefully. When you see this particular sign, it means there's a walk taking place ahead. Sometimes you could see things like slow down, men at work. Sometimes you could see things like no road, men at work. All of that is to notify you that there's a walk ahead, and most instances you just have to drive with caution, because the consequences could also be very terrible on your own side, particularly when it involves an accident, when an accident happens. How about this? Have you seen this? So when you see this, it means there's a traffic cycle or there's a roundabout ahead, and so you might have to slow down or find a better way of navigating yourself. This sign too is very common, and I'm very sure so many of us have seen it. It means pedestrian crossing. So it means pedestrian crossing, and it is for places where individuals would usually walk across the road. So in such instances, the traffic light is even regulated, so you have to give way and stop before the traffic light so that individuals can cross the road. Now when you see this particular sign, it means the road has been narrowed ahead, and so you have to drive with caution. This happens particularly when there's a rehabilitation on the road, and so the road is narrowed so as to provide walking space. It's usually very narrow, so you have to be very careful when you see signs like this. The road ahead is usually very narrow.